NBA draft. We're talking prospects. We got a USC to talk about a guard. No, not that one. The one that's actually going to get drafted highly. Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and I'm so tired you could say that I'm the epitome of fatigue. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball, on Instagram at redrock_bball, and on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. That's how fatigued I am. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA to use the code, all lowercase, LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Thank you also for being a double banging legend and making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen and second listen. Every day we are free and we're available for you to double bang on all platforms. So thumb it, ballot, comment it, review it, star it. Oh, we've got lots of different ways to double bang. But the main one is just you watch the video, listen to the audio. Easy done. We're here. We're talking NBA draft with a new guest. Someone hasn't been on the show before. You may recognize him. We'll talk to him now. All right, here he is. First time on the show. You have undoubtedly seen his channel over on YouTube. You may know him as 6 Rings of Steel. His name is Matthew Geist. Matt, welcome to the show for the first time.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk about some prospects today and a very interesting upcoming draft that I feel like is all over the place right now.
Yeah, that's the main thing, isn't it? Everyone looks at it and goes, yeah, I don't know. Like, there's just so many different ways to approach this, and you can pick out negatives on every single player, and you can pick out positives on every single player, and that's going to lead to some... I don't even know if they're going to be monumental mistakes. They're going to be mistakes, but in the end, we're just going to go, oh yeah, who knew? Like, we didn't really know how any of this went. GMs aren't going to know. Like, it's not going to be one of those like blindingly obvious, why did you not pick Luka Doncic type situations. I don't think, just because nothing stands out like that.
No, definitely. And I think like the last 2 drafts specifically, we saw pretty much the best players in those class go number 1 overall. Like you said, there's a good chance that the best player in this class goes into the first round or potentially even in the second round. So it's going to be interesting to see. Everybody seems like they have different big boards, different mock drafts, which I think is a nice change of pace of what it's been over the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, I think we might be in for one of those years where it's a Malcolm Brogdon wins Rookie of the Year type situation. It's just this random guy who gets playing time, who's experienced and does it, and then that's great. He's fine, but like that's not what it means in terms of long-term value. But let's escape that. I already teased at the start of the show before you came on that we are going to be talking about a USC guard, but it's the one who's actually good at this point, and we're going to be talking about Isaiah Collier, who I think when we headed into this season, Matt, Collier was sitting probably a little bit higher than where he is in mock drafts at the moment. I get the feeling, and I get these feelings with certain players that maybe we're just like, and my number one for this is probably Ron Holland, but I think we might just be overthinking a little bit on Collier. He's 19, he's 6'4", so he's maybe a little on the smaller side, but that's not too small. Some of the shooting stuff is a real worry, but I hate the free throws from him, but I just think that he's just a guy in a class like this that is devoid of A, freshman talent, and B, like dynamic passing type guards that maybe we're just overlooking some of the positives to really like negatively hit on the shooting stuff.
For sure. And I think like Collier, the big turning point for him this past season was kind of the injury he suffered in kind of like January. He's dealing with like a wrist thing, comes back in February. And like over his last like 13 games, the shooting splits were there. I mean, the free throws, like you mentioned, is a weird concern, but I think a positive is at least he does a great job of getting to the line. He's able to finish inside, and he's able to draw fouls better than almost any other guard, and even better than some wings in this class. So his counting numbers are good. Like looking at him and watching the film, it's just you would like for the free throws to just kind of improve a little bit, because he could have been north of a 20-point per game score at USC this past season if he was more consistent with his free throws, because it was very subpar at 67%.
Yeah, like 50% attempt rate is huge. Like most of these guys, these guards are hitting 30, 32, 33. Some of the big men go 50 or 60, but 50% as a guard is huge. And that is one of those things. It's not going to be 50% in the NBA, but it's a huge thing, being able to draw fouls. And most guards in the NBA, it's a real slow ramp up. And we look at guards and we look at their production and go, yeah, by year 4, then they'll be getting free throws. And it slowly goes up and up and up. But he's coming in at a higher rate than these guys. So he might be one of those, not necessarily foul grifting types, but someone who knows how to get to the line, someone who puts the pressure on the rim. Finishing at the rim, we'll figure that out later. But getting to the rim, having the desire and the drive, and I guess the intent to always get there is huge. And when you have some struggle with shooting, that's key as well. Like, offset your weaknesses, play to your strengths. He's there. Defensively, like 1.9 steals per 40 minutes is a pretty strong number. Like, how do we see him holding up? Because 6'4" is good. We know that as a general rule, we want point guards in the NBA having success are bigger. 6'3" tends to usually be this sort of a cutoff of these high-level guys. There's always going to be exceptions, but 6'4" is good. But is he going to hold up defensively? Is that going to be the calling card initially for Collier?
Yeah, I actually think he's going to be a solid defender throughout his career. I think he's quick enough on the defensive end of the floor. He tested well at the combine, and I thought I saw that on film this year, at least on the perimeter at times. And I think he's actually going to be strong enough in the post. Now, obviously, he'll get a little bit more challenging when he's getting switched on maybe guards or bigs in the post, but I do think he maybe can present more of like a stockier frame eventually throughout his career and actually be a pretty above average post defender for a guard. But I like his reach. I like his speed that he's shown, and I think he's going to be just okay. And USC had their issues defensively this past season. Like, their team defense, I think overall wasn't great. So for Collier, it could depend on the environment he's drafted in, obviously the head coach, the adjacent defenders around him. But I actually think he's going to project to be a pretty solid defender in this league.
Yeah, I think he will too. When you go through and look at like Wizzy's draft comp app and the advanced stuff, the guys that come up are all those sort of guards. Now, the problem with that is they're the guards that have got that size and physical profile and defensive ability who can't shoot, like Dennis Smith Jr., and there's Wade Baldwin, and then there's old mate Tony Roten, the Sixers legend. But then you get into some guys like Jaden Springer, another one, you go, man, if he can shoot. Like, that's the big thing with so many of these guys. But another name that sticks out there is De'Aaron Fox, who still has some shooting problems, had a wild jump in his 3-point percentage this season, but obviously has shown growth in all those areas. And I think if we're going to talk best case scenario for a Collier, I think that's what it is, a hard driving guy with defensive tools who's got passing vision, but that's not like he's not the elite passer. He's pretty good, but he's not like the transcendent passer, but just that speed, athleticism, attack mentality. When we're talking best case, no one's ever going to be the same as another player, but when we're looking at ideas and squinting Tobey Maguire, Spider-Man memes, like who it is, like maybe we can get to a De'Aaron Fox type of a player.
Yeah, I think so for sure. Because, like you were hinting towards, Fox was not a good shooter whatsoever at Kentucky. He did a good job of getting to the line, but was far from perfect from his free throws. But I think Collier kind of can show some similarities of Fox's game for sure. I think his playmaking is on par. He's in Fox was in a much better situation at Kentucky as well, playing with like Malik Monk and Bam Adebayo and other guys there as well. Collier was not a great environment in USC outside of Boogie Ellis. So I think that there are some similar tendencies there. Obviously, Fox is a little bit quicker, can I think be a little bit more agile at the rim, but I do think they show some similarities. And I like you bringing him up. I don't think he's going to be De'Aaron Fox, at least ceiling wise, but I think he can be someone that can get to the rim if he just locks himself into the gym and just can be more consistent of a free throw shooter, which we can see him develop, that he actually can be an effective scorer in this league. Because I think the jumper will play, all depending on the environment he's in once again.
We're not going to talk about Steph Castle in today's show, but in terms of a guy who's claiming that he's a point guard, who's this high-level defender who has significant offensive struggles, when we compare Collier and his shooting issues, like they're nothing in comparison. Like, he's not as good of a defender as Castle, obviously, and he's not as big as Castle, but the shooting concerns between the two of those, like it's pretty different, I think.
Yeah, I think for sure too. I think Castle was way too hesitant at UConn this past season. I think he could have. I think like Castle is probably projected to be a better shooter than some of the other guys with shooting inefficiencies this past year at college. But Castle, I think, was was more hesitant than Collier this past year. I think Collier had a better shot diet overall. But they definitely had different roles in their specific schools and were asked to do way different tasks. Obviously, with Castle was more catered to him being like a slasher cutter, playing on the best team in the country. As for Collier and USC, he has to do way too much, I think, on the offensive end of the floor. And honestly, like post-injury, like February on, I think he actually did a phenomenal job. And he could be, like you mentioned before in the beginning of this, like he could be somebody we're overthinking about it, like someone that can get to the rim, someone that could be an above average shooter, can hold his own defensively. And honestly, some teams need that guard help in the late lottery, in the late teens, or in the later part of the top 10, where I think Collier can actually be a pretty good fit on.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, when I redo my board, I think I had him at 12 maybe. I think I'll probably end up getting him into the top 10 when I redo, because I just sit there and look at it and go, like, it's most of it's there. Most of the things that I like, most of the things that teams like, most things that have success in the NBA are there. Not all of them, but I do have some faith in that stuff being able to develop. We've got more prospects that we're going to talk about. We're going to get to them in a sec. But I got to tell you that today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app. It's got more than 3 million members. Yeah, it's the easiest and most exciting way as well to follow your players and get in on the action while you watch your favorite teams, games, sports, leagues, whatever it is. You pick between 2 to 6 individual player stat projections and you just say more than or less than. It is that easy. Points, rebounds, steals, blocks, assists, fantasy points, whatever it is. Put them all together, and actually right now with certain select things during the NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs, you can actually win up to 100 times your money. $10 in, $1,000 out with as little as 4 correct picks. So get over to Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Download that app. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA and get a first deposit match up to $100. So download the app today, use the promo code LOCKEDONNBA and get a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, pick more, pick less. It is that easy. All right, Matt, that is our first prospect done. We're going to go into the second guy because that's how numbers work. Number 2, we're going to go to Devin Carter of Providence. So this is a guy that is getting a ton of buzz at the moment. You will hear, or we have heard the other day, that the Grizzlies are super interested in Devin Carter at pick number 9. I have been told that he has a draft promise in the lottery with a team. I'm not going to say exactly what team that is at this point, but but we can. It doesn't matter. Like, he's going to go high. Now I look, and this is sometimes I like to put on the casual Josh hat and look at this and go, let's not worry about looking into details and let's just talk about the surface stuff and go, right, so his dad played in the NBA. Cool. We know that part. I look at him and go, man, this guy looks really old. Like, I look at his face and I go, bro, he looks so old. Like, he looks like he's been through it and it's got, man, the grind's really getting me down. Yeah, he is 22. And I look at all these things and we talk about age. I talk about age a lot. Like, okay, he's 2 or 3 years older than what Isaiah Collier is. But in terms of what Carter is able to do through the college season defensively, like that sort of player, that sort of tenacity defensively, like, again, the value of that is huge for certain teams in the NBA. So are you a believer in Devin Carter being that impact player, that high-level defender in the NBA straight away? Or are you a little bit like, he's on the older side, like he did it playing for Providence. We're not talking like at the higher end of college production necessarily. Like, where are you at where Carter sits in the NBA landscape? Because the buzz is huge at the moment.
Yeah, I think once like Big East like play officially rolled in, I was super invested into Devin Carter, and I was so high on him. I'm like, it was at the time where it's like if you had a top 20 grade on Devin Carter, you were like really high on him, and now it's come to the point of, like you said, like he's probably going to be a lottery pick in this upcoming draft, and I think there's specific teams in the lottery I would absolutely love him on right away. Like, there's teams that want to compete next year. Obviously, Memphis is going to probably bounce back this past season. OKC wants to be right back in the thick of things. Same with Sacramento. And I think Devin Carter would be a beautiful fit on all these teams. I think his defense is real, with like right out of the gate. I think he's strong. He's one of the fastest guys in this draft. Absolutely killed the combine. Stood out with his athleticism. He could jump out of the gym. And I think from what we've seen in the playoffs, having the hustle factor, being able to crash the glass, and just being able to be more athletic than your opponents. Like, we're seeing that with Dallas and their big men. I mean, it worked out with the Knicks and their guards as well. If you're able to crash the glass, if you're able to defend and be a plus shooter, you're going to be very valuable as a role player in the playoffs. And I think Carter fits that mold perfectly right now.
I think you're right. I think there's a lot of things that are exciting about him as a prospect. Again, the thing that will always hold me back is I go, why are you coming out now at age 22? Like, what happened in those other years? Yeah, like, he played his first year at South Carolina, didn't play, transferred to Providence, but he started last year. He played 32 minutes a night. He shot poorly, but he's improved. So then I go, is this Davion Mitchell, where he was like, all right, bad, 1 year good, and now he's bad again? Like 27%, 29% from three, and then 38 this season. So, like, which one of those is real? Is it a legit improvement, or is it a 1 year outlier? So I get a little bit concerned there. But some of the main pro success indicators on Devin Carter. Huge steal rate. Like, we love that. Like, good usage, good free throw rate, good 3-point attempt rate. All of that is there. Average 22 and 10 with over 4 assists per 40 minutes with 2 steals and a block. All that stuff is great. But let me put it this way to you as well. Yeah, Matt. We saw a guard who put up some dynamic type of numbers, real defensive pest. He went in the top 5. His name was Chris Dunn. He went to Providence. And he's really good as a 20-minute-a-night defensive guard who just has absolutely no way of being any sort of impact guy offensively, and that's why he almost washed out of the league and then bounced back and found that role. Like, I know, again, that's the casual side of things. They went to the same school. They're both good defenders, so the same path has got to be there. So is there any... And Dunn's obviously went really high in his draft as well. Where are we at in terms of that risk of maybe the shooting's not real? Maybe he is Davion Mitchell, Chris Dunn, and just can't do anything offensively, so the defense doesn't actually get a chance to be impactful.
Yeah, for sure. And I actually think there are similarities between the two, obviously outside of the school and position and similar style of play. But I think there can be concerns with Carter. Like, the shot is a little wonky. Could there be a confidence issue? Could there be somewhat of a team where opponents are able to kind of leave him open, and will he get in his head? I just think, like, kind of if you look back at Carter and Dunn's numbers, I think Carter stand out a little bit more 3-point volume, better free throw shooter, although not perfect. But I think was able to get to the line and also just be able to hit big time shots, which was, I don't know how much stock I want to put into that, just like based off time alone. But man, like the Big East, I thought was a very good conference this year. And I thought he played very well against teams like Marquette, Nova, UConn. And he stepped up against these teams throughout the season. So I think there's the big game factor that I like about Carter. And I think he's going to be able to do it in the spotlight. And I thought Providence should have made March Madness, honestly, because I thought like that team was actually pretty good compared to some other teams that made it over them. But I think he's maybe not as good as a defender as Dunn was coming out of Providence, but I think there's more offensive talent, and I think Carter's going to be just fine defensively. And I guess for at least Dunn and Mitchell, just never really developed a consistent outside jumper. There was flashes, and I actually think Dunn is actually turned himself into a fine rotational player now, but not the pedigree he was when you mentioned he got drafted high back in 2016. So I think there could be the concerns, but I think we've just seen linear growth from Devin Carter. And I just really like his kind of big game feel. And I think he's going to be someone that could step up when the games matter the most. And it's a hectic, chaotic fourth quarter. And you can rely on him to get a clutch offensive rebound or hit a clutch 3.
Two of the interesting names that come up in terms of statistical comps, and like you said earlier, getting these guys who are able to sort of, mess around and play hard and do that sort of stuff and change their game and do what needs to be done in the playoffs. The name that I think would come to mind for a lot of people in these playoffs is Josh Hart, and he comes up as the number 1 statistical comp. Now, Josh Hart obviously is not a point guard in the NBA. Devin Carter might not be a point guard. Josh Hart is a 6'4" power forward at this point, but that's the statistical comp. The next one is Brandon Pajemski, and then we go to Peyton Pritchard and guys like that who've like obviously had roles. And then down the bottom of the list, it's Klay Thompson, which is a little weird to see Klay on that list. And it's also weird to see a Shabazz Napier because obviously he did not work in the NBA. So there's always going to be, you can find positives and negatives, but the Josh Hart, defensive, tough guy that just does a bunch of different roles and is really impactful defensively. And Hart was a high usage player in college at Villanova, like 28% usage in his final season. Like, you see him now and he takes like 2 shots a game a lot of the time. But that high usage player often in college, and I've said this has been a running theme throughout all these shows, these high usage guys in college, like the role players in the NBA are high usage college players. They just have to scale down and use their other skills. And that is just a gigantic tick in the box of where Devin Carter can go because he can do all those other things.
Yeah, for sure. And I've actually thrown out, like, I actually really like the Hart and the Pujemski comps. And I think there are similarities between those two in Carter's game. And I think like Carter, like, played like at Brewster Academy, like I think had the pedigree, was a top 100 recruit. And I believe went to South Carolina his freshman year, obviously didn't show, too much there. And then honestly, just the jump from Providence was great, showed flashes last year. And maybe it would have been better if he did this like a little bit more last year and you saw a little bit more of consistent shooting. That would have been nice to see. So you have like a better sample that he can actually be someone that can be consistent enough. But I really like the athleticism. I think it's going to play. There's a lot of good fits for him in the lottery and just outside of it. And I think that's just like kind of way like the league is going. And if he's going to be 6'3", 6'4", I think that's going to be fine because I think he plays up a level and he's going to be a good post defender. He's going to be someone that could switch on multiple positions on the defensive end of the floor. I actually think he has a really good IQ for that right now as well, playing at Providence last season. So there's a lot of like fits I love that he can go to. Obviously, people love talking about like the Miami Heat at 15. I mean, I've mocked that a ton. Does he even make it a 15?
Yeah,
Probably not.
He's not making it there. There's no way.
I know, yeah. So like exactly. So like there's going to be teams that are just going to like him. That's going to be able to step up right away. And I think people have a lot of faith in these guys that could be in year 4s, year 5s, year 6. But I think for somebody that you're looking as a glue guy, and that seems like what this draft is, the role player draft, Carter's at the top of it right now.
Agree completely. Like he's not going at 15 because if Miami wants him, they're going to have to get up because I don't. He's not getting out of the lottery. Is what I'll say on that. Now we're going to head in to talk about a guy, and there are quite a few of these sort of guys in this class. Players who were perhaps going to be drafted last season and then withdrew and went back to college, and they were hoping they were able to do a little bit more to boost their draft stock, and almost inevitably every one of these players has sort of just disappeared and no one talks about them, and we're going to talk here about Adem Bona from UCLA. Like, this is a guy, Turkish, 7 foot tall, lot of hype, and then like not 7 foot. I don't know where I got 7 foot tall. I got 6'9" on my thing there.
Yeah, 6'9".
Yeah, I was thinking of someone completely different. Anyway, 6'9" big man. Good defensive stats, steal and block numbers huge, but there's just no buzz about him whatsoever. Like, he did not go back and have that real improvement in that next season and take those big numbers jumping up. Like, it's just sort of sitting the same as he was last year, and that seems to be the case of so many of these guys who went back to school.
Yeah. I think Bona is somebody that, like you just didn't really hear his name too much this like collegiate season. I feel like I didn't. I mean, UCLA had somewhat of a down year as well compared to previous seasons, and they had like Jaime Jaquez in last year's draft. But I was like fortunate enough to go to the combine this year, and I will say like during the combine games, he stood out. He is one of the more athletic guys as you can get for someone that's going to be like a tweener at the 4 and the 5. He will like bust he'll just run up and down the floor with ease, and like he's someone that could get chased down blocks, is going to get back on defense, and I think that's what's very valuable for someone that's most likely not going to go in the first round. I mean, there's a chance the team really likes him, but if he's going to go in the early to mid second round, I think you're really finding a legit rotational guy here who's still just 21 years old, and he's someone that plays up in size. Like he could jump out of the gym, good wingspan, very quick for his size, 40 max vertical. I'm at the combine, and you even mentioned the defensive numbers. Like, he gets in the passing lanes. He's a physical guy, and I think that'll play in this league.
I agree with all that. Now, this is one of these things where, like, I don't know where you sit on like a Donovan Clingan necessarily, but I'm just not that in on it because, like, okay, well, I can get a Bona in the 20s. I'm not saying he's going to be the same player, but I can get a player like that. I can get Kalel Ware. I can get Deron Holmes at some point. Like, these useful centers, like, and I don't know what Clingan's upside is. Maybe he's only a 25-minute a night player because of offensive limitations or switchability limitations. I don't know that, but I also know that these guys can do a similar thing, and I just think value in draft equity of you've got to pick him at pick 3 or something. I'm just not that interested in doing that. So like Bona sort of fits in that group of late first, early second centers that we've seen so much success right across the NBA over many years. Like, one of the names that will always come to mind is like Jarrett Allen was picked there, Rudy Gobert was picked there. So many of these players that get picked in that area. And like, Bona's not going to be someone who steps out and shoots threes. I don't think he took like maybe 1 3 all season. But if we go back to the statistical comps, I always like finding some of these names. I almost gasped as I looked this up as we were talking, as you started talking about it, because the number one name that came up was a big man who played for Kansas. It wasn't Cole Aldridge. It was actually Joel Embiid. I went, there's no way. Like, how is Joel Embiid coming up as the number one statistical comp? So like, that's, and then the second one is Jalen Duren. I went, all right, now we're onto something. These are some very interesting names. Now, obviously, Embiid has taken his game to incredibly high levels compared to even where he was in college. But they are interesting names. Now, there are bad names there like Quincy Acey or Jordan Bell or Tyler Bay, who never even played a single game in the NBA. But yeah, it's a nice little range of outcome for a Bona who was pretty highly regarded last season as well.
Yeah. I guess the thing for Bona is just like the size, basically, like some of the guys you mentioned, like just being 7 foot, close to it or north of it. And Bona just measures at 6'9" in shoes, but he's got a really good wingspan. And I think the athleticism plays. He could jump out of the gym, and he's just like a physical unit out there. The dude is jacked. He's huge, and I think he's gonna have no issue. I think post defense, at least entering the league right away. I mean, obviously there's going to be mismatches like anybody would have against some of these NBA big men that are just so skilled offensively. But I think when you're looking at just like a rotational guy that's going to give you energy, that's going to give you hustle minutes off the bench, I don't think there's really a better guy than Adem Bona to get in the second round compared to some of the other big men that are probably couple years away, like your or Chomsky's of the world, are just guys that I think are going to take a little bit more time to develop. But I also like just kind of Bona more athletically than maybe if it's like an Oso Ighodaro or a Kyle Filipowski that do other things better than a Adem Bona. But I think if you're looking for straight someone that's going to hustle, get back on defense, and someone that's not really going to lose you any games and could make a winning player or two, I really like Bona in the second round for sure.
Let's go to the national champions. Let's go to Connecticut, Cam Spencer. We've covered a lot of old players on this show over the past couple of weeks, but this man has actually now turned 24. So we are really pushing the edges of credulity in terms of age. But we talk about, when you say about not losing games, and we talk about individual skills of a player, and there is there's one thing that's just going to stand out here, like it's shooting. And I know it's stereotypical, Matt. We look at this guy, he's a white guy, yeah. He's 6'4", he plays in the wing. He's going to be able to shoot, and some of the time that's not true, but in this case, it's it. What he does, like 91% from the line, 61% effective field goal, 56 3-point attempt rate. He averaged 18 and 6 per 40. Like, this is what he does. He shoots. Now, is the shooting, is it good enough to be able to push through other deficiencies that he might have? Like, he's not that big. He's 6'4". Like, he's not like he's 6'7" with the extra size advantage. Is he going to be able to defend enough? Like, what is that shooting? Which, and maybe you think something different, but is the shooting, like, which is a primary skill, is it enough?
It's tough for Cam. I don't think it's going to be, and that's why he's projected to go late in the second off of his numbers and not in the first round, or maybe he's going to end up being undrafted. But he's like, you have a great sample size from 3 different schools that he's shown good shooting at. And I love Cam Spencer's, like, not just like shooting outside the paint. He could get to the line, but he can also just play off of 2 feet, and he could slow the game down. And I think if you're looking at guys, maybe it's like, I don't know, it's like a lazy comp of like a TJ McConnell of the world, who has a high basketball IQ, is going to make winning plays, is not going to turn the ball over, but is also going to be an efficient inside scorer. There's a role for Cam Spencer in this league if he's willing to. It's like, you can't teach athleticism, and that's going to be a drawback for him. Like, is he going to be a liability on the perimeter? There's a chance, yeah. There's definitely going to be a chance with the lack of athleticism, the lack of quickness compared to some of his counterparts that he's going to be guarding in the NBA, much quicker guard. So there's I think a role for him and his shooting, because the release is good. He's got a good shot diet. He's got good shot selection overall. I think it will play. There's just going to have to be the right system, the right fit. Can he be the lead one off a bench? I'm not sure. He may have to play a little bit more off ball and be like a secondary shot creator. But if he gets the ball inside, he can work the pick and roll almost better than anybody else in this class because of his high basketball IQ and his court vision. And it was truly a perfect environment for him at UConn this past season. And it's going to be nothing like that at the NBA level. And it's going to be a lot more chaotic, a lot better defenders and smarter defenders. But I think there is a role for him. It's just got to be to a specific team that's willing to take a chance.
Often statistical nerds will look at 600 3-point attempts as a good number to sort of get where you're at with your shooting. So he took 667 3-point attempts through his career at Loyola, at Rutgers, and at UConn, and he hit him at 42%. So I'm pretty confident saying he's a good shooter. Like, I don't really have any doubts whatsoever about this. I'm not going to ever sit there and go, but maybe it's not going to. He's just a good shooter. And we have seen these guys who are second-round picks or undrafted guys. We see many of them have success, like Sam Merrill, Sam Hauser, Max Strus, Duncan Robinson. All these guys, they didn't get drafted. Their skill is shooting. They do it at a high level, and they find a role. Now, most of those guys, I think, maybe Strus isn't, but most of those guys are bigger than what Spencer is. Strus maybe is like 6'4", 6'5" himself, but like Robinson's bigger. Hauser's bigger, Merrill's bigger, so they've got that advantage, seeing over NBA length, all that sort of stuff, which I think that's probably going to be the biggest impediment to Cam in his shooting, is just the extra length that he sees defensively. Will that put him off? But these players can have success. We've seen it time and time again. The guy that can shoot, we can find a role, versus, well, what if this guy with these athletic traits, maybe we teach him to shoot? A lot of times that doesn't really work for those later round players. So there is hope there, but you've got to have the appropriate ceiling on your expectations.
For sure, yeah. And like when the game's breaking down and guys are going to be able to guard him much better in the half court, is he going to be able to come off screens? I think I don't know if I view him as that player like your typical Sam Merrills and your Max Struses. I feel like he'll be better with the ball in his hands and creating his own shots off the dribble, or basically just kind of in the pick and roll, I think, where he's better suited. But if he's able to get open looks, they're going to go in. He's elite from the line, like we know with this sample size. But yeah, there's definitely concerns about the athleticism, but we're not talking about someone that's going to go in the lottery or the first round or maybe even the first half of the second round. We're talking someone you're taking a chance on that could be a good off the bench guy for you and your team going forward. And I think that's pretty much what Cam Spencer is. And I don't think he has too much risk to him, but I think there's a ceiling on what he could be as a rotational guy for you.
Last player, we're going to head to Syracuse. Talked about this guy in last year's draft. Judah Mintz. Matt, I'll just be pretty plain on this. I think I hate him as a prospect. I don't really know, but I think, I don't want to. Like I want to like him. He's 6'3", solid size. He has some interesting moves. He's a 30 usage player. He gets the line a million times. 62% free throw attempt rate. That is like an insane number. That is like hacker center type free throw rate. That is Joel Embiid, current Joel Embiid free throw attempt rate. That is DeAndre Jordan prime free throw attempt rate. That is an insane number, but never takes the three. Doesn't take threes ever. You're a guard. You're 6'3". Like, you got to shoot, mate. Like, and I feel like when I look at his numbers and his overall efficiency, 47 effective field goal is horrendous. And it's the same as it was last year. Look, there's no year-to-year improvement, freshman to sophomore. So, I don't know. I think I hate him. Where are you at with Judah Mintz? Because, again, I want to like him, but I can't get there at the moment.
Yeah, same with Judah. I mean, like, there's athleticism. I actually think there's some defensive potential with him, but I feel like his offensive game kind of needs to be overhauled. There's like you mentioned, the free throw ability. Like, there's real potential at attacking the rim as well, but he can't really shoot. I feel like his shot selection also isn't great either. Terrible. Yeah, and I don't like the form. And his free throw percentage, I mean, it's fine. Like, he shot 6% last year, 77% from the line on 8 attempts. Like, there's room for improvement there. I thought he probably would have benefited another year at Syracuse or into the transfer portal. But there's, I think, too many concerns about his offensive game right now that I don't really think he's going to get much better in. At the NBA level, maybe there's some real development in the G League, but I don't think that's going to be prioritize while other people are trying to fight for jobs throughout there. So I think it would have been beneficial for him to go back to college for another year. I think off the athleticism, there's a chance I would take him like back half of the second round, probably like closer to pick 60 than pick 45 or pick 58 this year. But I think he's going to be more realistically like an undrafted free agent from this draft.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. Again, it's so intriguing, like getting to the rim, like that's awesome. Like we love that ability, the athleticism, the flash. I hate the fact that the assist to turnover ratio is so low as a point guard, and he's giving a little bit of like, maybe again, this is the casual look, like the way that like Amari Bailey was last season. We go, I think I like it. I think there's something that I can get there, but I don't really know if we actually ever get there. And then there are certain things that you just absolutely hate, and then depending on how you want to view the prospect, you can say, well, yeah, we'll ignore that. That'll get better, or you can hyper focus in on it. And at the moment, I'm just hyper focusing on like take better shots. Make them go in. Like, you're not going to get, maybe you are, but you're not going to get to the rim at that level, I'm guessing, at the NBA. And the steal rate is hugely encouraging, because having that level of steal rate, even if you're not a good defender, like that just means you are showing a level of dominance defensively, which is huge in the college game. But yeah, he's only young. He's almost 21. Like, he's not super young. He's not super old. I just worry about some of this shot selection stuff, and then that ties back into I guess coachability, IQ on the court, all that sort of stuff, where you go like, just you got to do things better. But in saying that, Matt, like Keontae George took some of the worst shots I've ever seen last season playing at Bay. Like, bro, what are you actually doing with these shots? And then he took some bad ones in the NBA, but he was really, really good, and his skills were able to get past that. Mintz isn't that player, but I'm just like, I'm out, I think.
No, I know for sure. And like when you mentioned that we were going to talk about Judah Mintz today, I was like, okay, let me kind of like refresh my mind like with Judah Mintz film, because I haven't watched him in a little bit, because I'm like, I don't think I have like a top 60 grade on him in this draft now as we're getting closer to the draft. And there, like you brought up the turnovers, there are some boneheaded passes. It's not great. Like there's positional like questions, like what is he really going to be in the NBA as an offensive player? And I think in like you look at 2 games watching Judah Mintz, you take his 2 best games, like there's even been good back-to-back games. You're like, all right, this man is a legit potential 3-level scorer if he could figure out the jumper, because the athleticism there, he can attack, he can get to the line. But then there's just like you go to a larger sample size and you look just at 6 games, 7 games, and it's just like too many inconsistencies. I feel like he never had really consistent style of play at Syracuse this past season. I don't think I would, like I said, I don't think I would take him in the second round. I would take a chance on him. Maybe he develops an outside shot in the G League, which is a possibility. Like, he's still a good athlete. He's still a good scorer overall compared to some of the other guys in his position in this class. But I think it's going to be tough for him. And I do wish he stayed another year at college.
Maybe he pulls out. When's the deadline's coming up in, like, by the time we're recording this? It's in like 5 hours or something. Maybe he does decide to go back to school. So we'll see whether that happens. As often happens, you could do all these prospects and then, like, random ones decide they're going to go back to school. But he played that game last year and it didn't really work out. So maybe he's like, just let me get me some money and see where we go. Matt, that is it for us talking prospects today. So thank you very much for coming on and chatting with me for the first time. Now, if anyone doesn't know who you are and what you do, which I find pretty amazing if they didn't, tell people, like, what do they find over on your channel? What sort of stuff are you putting out over there?
Yeah, pretty much kind of originated from like NBA 2K style content, like Six Rings of Steel. But now I've kind of transitioned on a channel called SROS, more talking about either college prospects or basically kind of overall stuff that's going on in the NBA, different kind of fun ideas over there. Thank you again, Josh, for having me on. This was super fun. It's a super cool draft process, and you're hearing so many different things about so many of these prospects on such a wide range of where they can go in this draft. And it's truly going to be one we're going to look back on in a couple of years and just be like, what were we thinking? Did we overthink it? But just really, we have no idea in the moment.
Yeah, it is fun like that. Like, it's frustrating. Like, you look at it and you go, man, I hate all these guys. I like all of them, and who knows what's going to happen. But it's always, the process is always fun. And Matt, it was great to have you on. Go check out Matt's channels if you don't already. And hey, we'll speak soon, mate. So that brings us to the end. I think bringing someone like Matt on again, it's just new guests, new perspective. So we've had Nick Kalinowski on, first-time draft prospect guest. We've had Ryan Hammer on as a first-time guest this season. Got Matt on as a first-time guest. Different prospects, different voices. Not prospects, different prospect evaluators, different voices, different ideas. And everyone would have seen Matt across on either of his channels over on YouTube as well. And if you haven't, go check them out. They're awesome. His rebuild stuff on 2K is awesome. Plus his other NBA content is really good as well. But you know what to do on this channel. You know that we want the thumbs. We want to hit the same subscriber number that Matt's got over on his channel. So hit that thumb, ring the bell, notifications. All of that stuff is sick. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.